Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with episode number 22 in our incredible new tutorial series where you're learning how to think like an engineer using the Arduino Uno R4 Wi-Fi. What I will need you to do is pour yourself a nice tall glass of ice cold coffee. That would be straight up black coffee poured over ice. No sugar, no sweeteners, none needed. And as you're pouring your coffee, as always, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Sunfounder. Sunfounder is actually sponsoring this most excellent series of video lessons. And in this class, we will use the Sunfounder Elite Explorer Kit. Now, hopefully most of you guys already have your gear, but if you don't, look down in the description. There is a link over to Amazon. You can hop on over there and pick your kit up. And believe me, your life and my life are going to be a whole lot easier if we are working on identical hardware. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's jump in and talk about what I am going to teach you today. And we have an exciting lesson for you today, and we're going to be taking things up to that next level, because so far what have we been doing in this class? We've been turning on LEDs, we've been turning off LEDs, we've been blinking LEDs, we've been changing the color of the LEDs, but today, for the first time, we're going to move something. I'm going to show you how to create motion using a servo. Sound good? I hope it does. So let's buckle up and let's get ready to go. I will need you to get your kit out, and I need you to find your servo in the kit. And for me, and probably for you if you haven't messed your kit up here in the corner is this little bag with this little blue motor looking thing in it. Take that little bag out, carefully and neatly close your kit up and set it aside. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get the little blue servo out of the bag. Okay, you're going to get the little blue servo out of the bag. And what we are going to do is we are going to get me out of your way, and we are going to hook it up. Well, what I want you to see is there are 3 wires. Red is power. That will go to 5 volts. Brown is ground, brown is ground, and then orange is control. Now, different servos might have a different color scheme, but usually brown is ground, red is power, and then orange is control. Now, the one thing I have to warn you is what I'm showing you today is for this little servo, the SG90. This is a low power servo, and you can run this servo off the Arduino. If you are using a different servo or a bigger servo, you need to check and make sure that that servo isn't drawing more current than you can get out of the Arduino, because if you try to run a bigger servo or a big servo off the Arduino, you can burn it out. But what do we have? We have power, red, we have ground is brown, and then we have orange as control. Now, if you did want to run a bigger servo, you can still control it from the Arduino, but that red wire you would need to connect to an external voltage supply, a 5-volt DC voltage supply that has enough current drive to drive your bigger servo. Okay, now if you do that, you have to connect all your grounds together. The ground of the Arduino has to be connected to the ground of the servo, has to be connected to the ground of the external power supply. Okay, but for this case, in this small servo, it is okay to run it, to power it, and control it off the Arduino. So I am going to get a red, an orange, and a black. Why? Because I like ground to be black, and so we're going to go that way with it. And so let's hook this thing up. So black is going to go to ground, brown is ground. So I'm going to put black lined up with that brown pin. And then the next one, the middle one is red. Well, I'll use red to red here. And so I'll come in with my red wire, and I'll put that lined up with the red. And now I have what? I have orange. And I will put orange to orange. Some of the servos, it seems like the control pin is sometimes yellow. And if you're not sure, look on the specs if you're using a different servo than this. Now let's get this thing hooked up. So we're going to go, the red wire goes to power, which is that 5-volt pin. And then orange is control. And the thing is, you can use whatever pin you want. whatever digital pin you want, but it needs to be one that can produce PWM. So it needs to be one that has the squiggly. So I'm going to use pin 9 like that. You see orange is connected to pin 9. And now what I'm going to do is black is going to go, the black wire is going to go to ground, GND. Okay, so I got the thing hooked up. I'm going to see if hopefully I can kind of tape this servo down so it isn't flopping all over. Man, and those wires are driving me crazy. Look at these wires everywhere. There is no way to get that neater, so I'm just going to have to power on through and live with a little bit of a rat's nest there. But now that we have it hooked up, now we're ready to start programming it. So let's come over to our code view here. And what I will tell you is the Arduino by itself does not know how to go in and control a servo. It needs a helper program. What do we call those helper programs? We call them libraries. And we're going to have to use the libraries. Well, in order to use a library, in order to load a library, you have to install the library. So this is the first time we've seen this. I'm going to show you how to install a library. Over here on your Arduino IDE, you see these little books. If you click on them, that is your library manager. You can also get to library manager by coming over here, and you can come down to manage libraries like that. Okay, and then you get to the same place. Click, click. All right, now what library do we want to install? Well, we want to install a servo library. Now you can see it comes up with like 100 different servo libraries, but we want this Arduino one that's called Servo by Michael Margolis, Arduino. We want to install that. Now notice I am installing 1.2.1, and as of the time that I'm making this video, that is the latest library. But if you're coming in later, the best thing for you to do is use the identical library that I'm installing. That way, if you use the same library I'm installing, if you use the same version I'm installing, you should get the same result. And I am using 1.2.1, and now you just click install. It goes out, it gets that software, it brings it down into your IDE. You see that I have successfully installed it. Now I have the library, but if I'm going to use the library, and you only have to do that once, if you come back later, you've still got the library. But if I want to use the library, I have to include the library in the program. So I do a pound include. You notice when it sees include, it turns it that kind of yucky pea green color, but that just means it recognizes it. Now I've got to tell it the library by an open triangular bracket. The library is servo .h. The .h is important. Close that triangular bracket. Now, a little bit surprising and unusual, on these include library commands, you do not end in a semicolon. So that's one of the few places that you don't use a semicolon in Arduino. Now we've got to set up our pin. We are going to have a servo pin, and that was connected to what? That was connected to pin 9 and a semicolon. Now we also, the way we're going to move this is we're going to send it an angle. We could send it an angle of 0 or 45 or 90 or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, any number between 0 and 180. Now you've got to understand, this is not a motor that will just spin and spin and spin. It will go from 0 to 180, and that is it. So you can 0 to 180, 180 to 0. But we send it an angle. Well, if we're going to send it an angle, we're going to need a variable for that. So we're going to say int servo angle, and we'll just initialize that to 0 like that. Now we might want to talk to the serial monitor, so let's go ahead and set up a baud rate. BR is going to be 115/200 like that. Okay, and now this is something that is a little bit new, and that is that in the software, if I want to talk to this physical software, if I want to talk to this physical servo, I need to set up a servo object in the software that I can talk to. And what do? I called the Servo library, right? This is the library. So you have to type this exactly like this, Servo. And then what do you want your Servo object to be named? I think I could call it Blue Servo, like that. That would be good. But it'll be a little shorter. I'm just going to call it My Servo. Okay. Now you could call it X if you wanted to, but if you came back and looked at your code later, it'd be hard to understand what you were doing. So if I call it My Servo, it's kind of clear what it is. So I like that. Okay. I have those things set up. Now we will come down here. Let's go ahead and turn the serial monitor on just in case we want to use it. Serial.begin and BR. And sometimes you think, oh, I don't need the serial monitor for this program, but what if you have an error and then you want to print out some things to try to do some debugging? I usually turn it on. Now you might be thinking that we are going to do a pen mode, and if you're thinking that, you would be wrong, because what we're not going to do is we're not going to do a pen mode, but what we are going to do is we are going to attach the servo to that pin. Well, how will we do that? Well, what is the object? What is the servo called? My servo. What do we want to do? We want to dot attach it. What do we want to dot attach it to? Servo pin, like that. And so now that servo library knows that it's talking to pin 9, which is servo pin. Hopefully that makes sense. Now we're going to come down here. Also, I'm probably going to need a delay time. So I'm going to just put int dt, and I'm going to put, like, let's say 50 milliseconds. Now, why do we do that? Because you can't just sit and hammer that servo, because it'll get confused. Because the servo gets your command, it moves to that position, and that physical motion takes a little time. So you can't just sit and give it a bunch of servo commands, because it takes a little time to move something physically in the real world. I think 50 milliseconds should be okay. Now, how do we move the servo? I'm going to do a my servo dot write. And what do I want to write to it? The servo angle, like that. Okay. Now, what did I set my servo angle to? I set it to 0. All right. And then I set it to 0. And so now I'm going to do a delay of dt, so it's not just sitting there talking to it too quickly. Now, the first time you run it, don't have any of these little horns on it, because I want to set it to the 0 position, and after I set it to the 0 position, then I will put the horn on it. So we're going to try to run this thing. Let's see what happens. Looking pretty good. None of that ugly orange nonsense, and it is going, and boom. I don't know if you could hear it, but when I ran that, I heard a little noise. So this was not at the 0 position. Now it's at the 0 position. If you did not hear a little buzz, just a very short little buzz, probably you were already at the 0 position. Now I'm going to get one of these horns out. So there is a bag inside the bag. And then I'm going to get this horn that is just the simplest one, that's just kind of straight up, straight across. This one. Okay. That's the one I want to use. I don't use these screws. Maybe if you were doing something perfect, you know, if you were doing something more permanent, you would screw it on, but I don't want to fool with those screws. It holds on there pretty snugly without that. Now, what is in math? 0 angle is pointing along the positive x-axis, so this would be the 0 angle. And so I want to look at this, and I want to point it along the positive x-axis, because that in fact would be 0 degrees. And so now this is oriented kind of like with an imaginary coordinate axis, like that. Okay, so now let's come in and let's say if my servo angle was 90 degrees, now let's run it and see what happens. All eyes on the servo, all eyes on that little horn, and it compiled. It is downloading, and boom, it went to 90 degrees. Now you see, it doesn't look exactly 90 degrees, but when I started, you know, with the way those gear teeth worked, it was a little bit further over here. So it did move 90 degrees. And then what if we said we wanted to go to 180? And it's to absolute position. It isn't I'm moving it 180 further. I'm moving it absolutely to 180. And so let's try that. Okay, we're moving stuff, guys. This is pretty exciting. And boom, it came over here to 180. Now, what is the one thing that's kind of awkward about our program? You don't want to run the program again every single time that you want to move the servo. So what I'm going to do is up here, I'm going to just declare that variable. And now I'm going to ask the user what angle they want to be at. And I can read that into servo angle, but I'm going to have to prompt them. So I'm going to have to create a string like that, and that is going to be prompt. And what is the prompt? It's going to be equal to the string. What angle do you desire? Like that. Okay, and then semicolon. What angle do you desire? That is my prompt. Now, if I want to get that from the user down here, what three things do I have to do? I have to ask, I have to wait, and I have to read. So how do I ask? I ask nicely by doing a serial dot print ln and then prompt like that. Always check my variables. Prompt. Yep, that's right. Okay, so I've asked. Now what do? I need to wait. How do I wait? While serial dot available open close equal 0. That is my condition. And while that is true, what do I want to do? Absolutely nothing in this while loop. It just loops until it gets something from the user. And once it gets something, what does it want to do? It wants to read it. And so servo angle, I am going to read, and I do that as a serial dot parse int because we had it set up as an int, and then like that. And so now I should have that angle. And if I'm thinking about this right, this should work. So let's run it. Okay. None of that ugly orange nonsense. And it is downloading, and we're going. And boom, look at that. Look at that. Now, I am not sure why it started up and down. Okay, it's like it started kind of in a strange thing. Maybe I should have like done a servo angle, set it up here, and then set it to a specific location. But what you can also see is you can see that it's not asking me because the serial monitor wasn't open when it ran. So I'm going to go ahead and start it again. And now it's saying, what angle do you want? I'm going to say 0. And man, I sure hope it goes to 0. And boom, it went to 0. Now let's say 90 and boom, it goes to 90. Let's say 180, and it goes to 180. Who's your friend? 45. And then when we do 45, it goes to 45. Who's your other friend? 135. And it goes to 135. And then what if we had 89? Okay, and then boom, it goes to 89. Okay, man, do you guys see that we are controlling this thing? That is really fun. Okay, I can't help myself. I shouldn't do these things on the fly, but what I'm going to do is instead of asking the user, I'm just going to put it through its paces. Okay, I'm just going to put it through its paces. So here in the loop, I'm going to say for I is equal to 0. I'm going to start at 0. And then remember, it is a semicolon in there. And then I'm going to keep going as long as I is less than or equal to 180. Okay, less than or equal to 180, like that. And then I is equal to I plus 1. So I've created a for loop. Now I've got to open the for loop clause and close it. So now all the code in here will be in it. Well, what do I want to do? I want to do a servo dot. And it's not servo, it is my servo, right? We called it my servo. So I'm going to do a my servo dot write. And then what do I want to write? Well, I want to write this number that I'm taking from 0 to 180. So that's going to be I. Okay. And now I'm going to delay by dt like that. And we got to remember our semicolons. Now, if I'm going to use I down here, I better declare it up here. And I don't have to give it a value because that's taken care of in the for loop, but I just got to tell it that I is an int. And then I'm just going to go from 0 to 180. And now let's try that and see what happens. Okay, we're going to run it. And what did we do wrong there for? It should be a semicolon. And what did I use? I used a comma. Different languages use different formats like that, and sometimes I get a little rusty on it. Okay, look at that. Look at that. Look at it go. It went from 0, we're to 90, and it's stepping through, and it's going to come to 180, and then it goes back. Look at that. That thing is stepping through there. It is stepping through there. Okay, what do I not like? I don't like how it goes back all at once. And so what I want to do is I want to step it up and then I want to step it back. So I'm going to take this, and then just as I stepped it up, now this time, where am I going to start? I'm going to start at 180. Okay. And this time, as long as I am greater than or equal to 0, and each time I is going to be equal to I minus 1. So let's think through that. Here I start at 0 and I go to 180. But when I get done, where is it? It's at 180. So this time I want to go from 180 back to 0. Okay. And then each time I'm going to go down 180, 179 down to 0, and then it'll fall out, and then it should go back and forth. Now I'm going to put, let's make this, I hope this isn't too painful, but let's make it 100. It's kind of a little bit not exactly what I wanted to see there. So let's play with that value a little bit. Here it comes. Okay, now, yeah, now that is a little bit too slow, but we'll let it go through. What I would probably do is I would probably come back and I would make it a little bit faster, because that is a little bit too slow. Now what we want to see now is we want to see it turn. Yeah, you see it's turning around and going back now. So that is doing exactly what we wanted it to do. Now what is cool about this, if we had a temperature sensor, then we could put an arrow on here and we could have a dial that sort of points to what temperature we are at based on the temperature sensor. Or we could give some sort of other indicator on here. Or we could have a little box that we opened or closed. Maybe as it saw something happen, the box would open or the box would close. So you see, we're able now incorporate motion into our programs, which is a pretty cool type of thing. Now, my friend, it is time for your homework assignment. What your homework assignment is to write a program where you have the servo and you have the potentiometer, and if the and listen, because sometimes you guys don't listen to me. It needs to be exactly what I am saying. When your servo is turned all the way, when your potentiometer is turned all the way to the left, your servo needs to be pointing to the left. And then as you turn the servo to the right, the potentiometer, when you turn the potentiometer to the right, the servo goes to the right. So you're setting the position of the servo based on the potentiometer. And don't do it backwards when you're all the way to the right on the potentiometer and your servo is all the way to the left. No, have it where as I move the potentiometer, the servo moves along with it and it tracks it. It tracks it. The servo tracks the potentiometer. One other quick note I've got to give you. Don't use your servo as a fidget toy. What used to bug me when I had real students in the classroom, they would sit there with their servo and they would just turn it, like they would bzz, 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 turn it by hand. It is very easy to damage these servos. There's these little plastic gears in there. And if you spin this thing by hand, you'll damage those gears in there. So don't sit and fidget. If you want to fidget, get a pencil and go like this with it. Or maybe get a straw. I used to give kids straw so they could sit and they could drum with the straw and it wouldn't bother other students. But there's all types of fidget toys you can use or make or think about, but don't use your servo as a fidget toy. So never turn the position of the servo with your fingers by spinning that thing. Important little tip there, okay? I am going to come over here. So that is going to be your homework assignment. And guys, I hope you're enjoying taking these lessons as much as I am making them. As always, I want to give a shout out to you guys who are supporting me over at Patreon. You are the guys that keep this channel going, and I really appreciate it. And I thank you for standing with me. You can also help me by giving me a thumbs up or leaving a comment down below. If you have not already subscribed to the channel, when you do, ring that bell so you get notifications when future lessons drop. And as always, most importantly, share this video with other people, because the world needs more people thinking like an engineer and fewer people sitting around watching silly cat videos. Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.